Let's do a stress test to see how these 280 amp hour cells perform with the JK BMS. Hi folks, I'm Roger from Offgrid Vanlife, and in this episode we are doing a stress test, which is basically a temperature test of these 280 amp hour cells that we built into this battery. So this is a standard battery replacement size with 4 280 amp hour cells with a JK BMS. In some of our previous tests, we noticed that the JK BMS gets fairly warm, and we were just concerned that if we build it into a battery, and then stress tested how is it going to perform, how hot is it going to get. So we have a 2 kilowatt inverter attached to this battery with a fan heater. We've also got 4 temperature probes. So this one is alongside the top of the JK BMS. And this one goes down the other side of the JK BMS, and then 2 more that are just on various points on the terminals, etc. So we want to see the overall heat buildup in here, and specifically the heat buildup where the BMS is, to see how hot that gets. In addition to our 4 temperature probes here, we also have the 2 temperature probes that are part of the BMS. So there's little wires with a temperature probe at the end of the wire. And then the MOS inside the BMS itself has its own temperature probe. So it should be able to tell us how hot it's getting. So if I pull out the app and have a look at this, what it is now, let's record the screen. I can see, so the overall voltage of this battery is 14.79, bit higher than we normally do, but we haven't actually set the cutoff on this BMS yet. Cells are well in balance, so the diff is 0.008. But the important figures that I wanted to have a look at, the 2 temperature probes, the one is 18.6 and the one is 16.3. And the MOS is currently at 22.8. So everything is nice and low. So let's turn the inverter on. Inverter is on. And we're going to start running the fan. So we're going to run this test for probably half an hour to an hour and just see what the heat buildup inside here is. Let's kick it off. So we're drawing 155 amps now. It's come up to 155 amps. And we'll expect things to start heating up pretty quickly. The question that we're asking ourselves is, how long can you run this thing at 150 amps before it gets too hot inside? Will it actually protect itself? Will the BMS shut off when it gets too hot? And already it's gone from 24 to 27. So the MOS is heating up fairly rapidly. Let's see how it goes. So we've been running for just over half an hour. The voltage has dropped slightly, which is expected. So according to this, it's at 12.9. This is 11.9. So you lose 1 volt down the cables. The 2 temperature probes, well, the one is sitting at 28.5, the other at 42, and then the MOS temperature has gone up to 63. So the MOS is fairly high at this point in time. If we look at some of these, so this one is on this side alongside the BMS, and it's at 45 basically, 44.9. So this one is on the other side, down the side, and you can see it's quite a lot hotter at 51.5. So maybe it's with the cables attached to the side of the BMS. These other 2, this is basically 40 degrees. That's sitting on the negative cables there, and this is on one of the bus bars. It's 45, so fairly high on the bus bar. Later on, we'll probably start looking in more detail to see exactly what's heating up where. But we wanted to, as I said at the start, we wanted to have an indication of how this would perform in the enclosed case. And as we can see, it is starting to build up heat, been running for more than half an hour. So these are quite warm, actually. When my fingers are very heat tolerant, and it's just too hot to keep my fingers there comfortably. So I'm guessing that these are have got to approximately 50-60 degrees centigrade. We wanted to know how this would cope in the enclosed box for an extended period of time. So preferably we would have liked to run this for about an hour or so. I'm not sure that we're going to get up to an hour, because the moss has got to 64 degrees centigrade, which is getting pretty hot. I suspect that the cables on the side of the BMS are quite hot as well. That's why later on we'll lift it all out of here and then run it again and see where it heats up and see what we can do about those points. It might be a case of it's going to heat up anyway and we can't actually run in a box like this for longer than, say, 45 minutes or so, which is fine. Most people wouldn't run this at 160 amps for more than 20 minutes or so, because that's the kind of thing you do when you're making a coffee or something like that. Even mini ovens don't run at this high in amperage. They run at about 50-60 amps, and this thing would be able to go for a few hours at that, I'm sure. But we will try that later on and see just how it does. Right, so we've been running for 45 minutes. For the last 20 minutes at least, we've been running at constantly 156 point something amps. So at the moment it's 156.8 amps. And the battery, the BMS is still reporting 12.95, 12.90. This will probably still be about 11.9. So the inverter is reporting 11.9. So we drop 1 volt going down the cables. That's quite normal. These have got quite hot to the touch. I can't keep my finger on here for more than just 1 or 2 seconds, and I have very heat tolerant fingers. So these terminals have become quite hot. In terms of the temperatures, so the temperature probe on the cells is up to 31. That's probably just the heat in the overall. You can feel that the overall case is warmed up. So 31, the probe on the cells, the probe that's against the BMS is at 47.2, and the MOS has reached 69.3. So just shy of 70 degrees centigrade on the MOS itself. So been working pretty hard in that enclosed space. If we look at these, so this is the probe that's running on this side of the BMS. So it's at 49.5, so not heating up much more. This one's at 57.8, which is running along this side. So obviously the connection on this side is a bit warmer, generating some heat. Be good to get the whole pack out and actually measure just how much heat it is generating. Elsewhere on the pack and on the bus bars, we're at 44.4 and 49 degrees centigrade. So it's fine. The number of people that would run this battery, and you'd have to specify that you can't actually run this for longer than definitely not longer than half an hour at this kind of draw, 156 amps, 160 amps. As I mentioned, we'll be running a much lower amperage for something that would simulate, say, a little mini oven that you would want to run for a long time. But to run at 160 amps for more than 45 minutes would be quite something. And if you did need to do that, you would probably not have a single battery anyway. You'd probably have 2 batteries, or you would have a custom-built battery that can ventilate and can go to a much higher temperature. But so far, very, very pleased with the JK BMS. It is coping inside this case. It has allowed us to push pretty hard and has coped quite well. So we're going to run a few more tests. We're going to charge it up and run it again, charge it up and run a few times. We want to see if some of the reports that people have made around the moss burning out eventually are true, or whether this moss holds out indefinitely. So thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next episode. Cheers, folks.